Okay, let me make sure the sound's off on this computer over here. Okay, yeah, we can hear you, Jerry. Thanks for joining us on Zoom.
Thanks, Chris.
What's up?
At first, I couldn't get in.
Uh-huh.
I had to go through 3 steps to get in.
Oh, really? That's strange. Yeah, it should just be.
I've had too many birthdays, Chris.
I can empathize with you.
All I should be able to do is touch one button,
Yeah.
ASL Basic, and let it do the rest.
I know technology should be more simple, right?
Yeah.
Well, one day we'll figure it out. So I think we'll just go ahead and get started with this workshop, and I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody that is on Zoom right now. If you do have a question, feel free to unmute yourself, and you can verbally ask us the question. Or if you would like, you can type it into the chat. And as far as everybody joining us on the live stream, you can do the same. If you have a question that you would like us to cover specifically, feel free to go ahead and type that into the chat, and we'll try to cover it if we can get to it. So we did want to go over some questions or some challenges that a lot of people have been sharing with us the past month or so, and I'll go ahead and kind of do a really brief overview of what others have been challenged with, and maybe that's something that you've been struggling with too. So speed was actually one of the things that people had greatest concern about, and I think that kind of had to do with fingerspelling, or at least receptive fingerspelling, and as a bigger picture as receptively understanding others.
Sorry to interrupt.
You
got feedback.
Oh.
You're talking feedback.
Okay. No, Rachel doesn't have the feedback issue.
It's still feedback. Yeah.
Okay. That's strange. It shouldn't. We have no audio happening in here. And let me know if you're watching this on the YouTube stream, if you're having any feedback issues at all. And I think, Jerry, I think you're the only one on Zoom that's having the feedback issues. But thanks for letting me know.
Okay, it's me then.
I think so, unfortunately. So anyway, so speed was one of the greatest things that people have been struggling with. And thanks, Felix, for letting me know that no feedback on issued, and 3D Rex as well. And comprehension, receptive skills, finger spelling in general, remembering the signs that you've learned, staying motivated over a long period of time, continually being entertained by learning the language, just making the time to learn the new language, right? That is a huge struggle that, that's something that I struggle with all the time, because we have busy lives these days. Differentiating between similar signs, so we'll cover a little bit about that tonight too. And expressiveness, having the appropriate facial expressions, and generally having or just being expressive in the language. And last but not least, grammatical structure and syntax. We're going to do our best to cover all of these things in tonight's workshop and live stream. And if you are having any difficulties or challenges or hurdles that you're having a hard time overcoming, just let us know, and we'll try to cover that as well. So let's go ahead and start with speed, because that was kind of the number one thing that people have been struggling with. And so did you want to go ahead and share some advice as far as receptively and maybe expressively signing or finger spelling in general?
Okay. What was your question? I interpreted it, but
speed.
I was
so
listening.
Finger spelling speed, receptively understanding others, even if they're maybe signing pretty quickly.
Signing fast. Okay, so finger spelling. So I'm going to start with finger spelling. I'm going to make sure I don't simcom at the same time, because Chris is interpreting. So finger spelling can be a struggle for people, whether it's producing finger spelling or if you're trying to receptively understand finger spelling. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips and tricks for both. When it comes to receptive, your ability to read somebody else's finger spelling, a lot of times we get frustrated with ourselves, right? We're like, I don't understand. I can finger spell. I'm pretty good at sign. I understand what's going on, but why can't I understand their finger spelling? Like, what is it? They can go super slow, and I'm still like, what? Like, what is it? Well, I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why that is because when you practice sign language, when you're learning and you're going through your flashcards, or you're watching videos, or you yourself are like finger spelling, you're used to seeing it from your perspective. I'm practicing finger spelling all day long, and my brain and my eyes are used to seeing it from my perspective this way. But your brain is not used to seeing it from this perspective of it being done at you. So once it's being done to you, your brain goes, what is that? I don't understand. You know that that's the letter M. You know that. But when it's being produced to you, you can't see it. It's like your brain can't comprehend it. So one of the best things you can do for that is to practice your finger spelling in a mirror. That way, you're getting your practice, your finger spelling, but you're also teaching your brain, your eyes, to receptively understand it from this perspective of it being done to you. When you do that, it's teaching you kind of, what's my word? I'm thinking of a word. Well, you're in a sense teaching your brain. You're teaching your brain how to be able to understand it when it's being produced to you. So that's just a simple little trick on how to help you with your receptive finger spelling. Of course, too, some people are like, lightning, boom, and you're like, what was that? What was that? It's okay to say, I don't understand. Do you mind going slow again, please? You can even throw in an, I'm sorry. You can, but it's fine to ask, like, again, please. I'm a certified interpreter. I work with the deaf all day long. And there are times when I'm interpreting and my client goes, I'm like, whoa, again, whoa, again, a little bit slower. As an interpreter, we have to tell them sometimes if they could slow down, because it's important that we fully understand what's being said. So when you're having a conversation with somebody and they fingerspell super fast, don't be afraid to say, I'm sorry, can you do that again, please? I missed it. And then just ask them to be a little bit slower when they're fingerspelling. There's nothing wrong with that.
One more thing to add to that too is because fingerspelling is such a challenge, and I'll try not to simcom too.
No, okay. Oh, that's right. Sorry. Go ahead.
The challenge is real, but anyways, one of the huge things when it comes to receptively understanding somebody, whether they're signing or whether they're fingerspelling, is context. Context can be huge. So if you can keep up with what the context of the conversation is about, it can really help you narrow down and figure out what it is that they're fingerspelling. Is it a name of a family? Is it a name of their brother or sister, or is it a pet? Or are they fingerspelling a state? Are they fingerspelling the model of a car that they had when they were younger? So the reason why context is so important is, let's say, for example, it's a state, right? And they fingerspell, right? Because you know it's a state, you probably caught what that was, right? It was Alaska. And the moment you see the first letter, even, it really deduces how many states that could be, right? It can't be California, it can't be New York, it has to be, Alaska or Alabama or something along those lines. So it really helps you narrow down to what it could be. And again, if it's maybe a character in a story, and there's only so many characters that are in that story, you're going to be able to kind of breeze through the fingerspelling a lot easier, and you don't have to worry so much about the other person understanding you too if you're familiar with who you're talking about. And so that can really be beneficial too when it's long or if it's fast. And another thing you can kind of that really helps too is just kind of taking in the shapes of the letters as a whole. So let's say we have Joseph as a person's name, and then also let's say Jose, right? So you have Jose, 4 letters. It starts with a J, ends with an E, Jose. And then you have Joshua. I think I said Joshua, right? Joshua, right? Joshua. And you can see that there's a really clear difference between Jose and Joshua, right? And so once you establish who these people are, and you can kind of familiarize yourself with the general shapes of the way the name sign or the way the name looks, then you're able to just be able to almost mentally read it in your head at the same rate as it's being spelled. And no longer are you piecing together Joseph or Jose. You're saying Jose or Joseph in your head. And so those, keeping the context of the conversation, becoming familiar with the way a certain name or a word looks when it's fingerspelled. And also, like Johnny was saying, is if you practice in a mirror or just practice with others, and that's going to really help train your brain to receptively understand at a much faster rate.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. I think I actually wanted to jump over to this comment that we got on Zoom from Rachel. She had a really good question. I'll go ahead and read it if you don't mind interpreting it. So her question was, I was wondering what your suggestions are about dealing with overcoming issues related to making certain difficult hand positions. This could be due to arthritis, making it difficult to fully straighten your fingers, like when making the letter D or I, or just lack of hand flexibility. Personally, I have trouble making the number 6 because my ring finger stays really close to my pinky and I can't bring it up to be next to my middle finger. Thanks. So this is a few years ago, and I'm right-handed, and a few years ago I really had a bad shoulder injury and I was in a sling for a while. And so I ended up having to fingerspell and sign one-handed and with my left hand. The problem is not only am I right-handed and I had to sign and fingerspell with my non-dominant hand, but I also have broken about 3 or 4 of the fingers in my left hand. And so it's really hard for me to produce accurately or clearly certain letters just because they don't bend that way, right? And I think this is a challenge for a lot of us that are maybe older in years or maybe have had injuries or arthritis or maybe Parkinson's, or where you have shaky hands. And so it can be physically hard to produce certain letters or certain signs. The big thing to remember is that people are going to be patient with you and not to stress about being perfect or being able to produce a certain letter or perfect or a sign just so, because if the person knows you fairly well, they're going to be able to understand and communicate with you just fine, even though you're not producing it perfectly. And usually that trips us up ourselves and not so much the other person. And for example, over the years, we've met deaf people that have like, gosh, what was it, that one?
Cerebral palsy.
Cerebral palsy.
Cerebral palsy.
And his fingers just wouldn't move. And so he ended up just kind of drawing the letters the best he could. And so, you knew that it was a physical limitation. And so, of course, you're going to be patient and you're just going to do the best you can. And even though it might not be the fastest way of communicating, it's a way of communicating. And so long as you're patient with yourself, if that's something that you're having a hard time with, maybe it's producing 6, 7, going through the numbers, or producing a certain sign, just be patient with yourself and know that others are going to be patient with you as well.
I'm going to add to that. Sometimes when we're learning sign language, it's a struggle. Oh, sit on my hands. It's a struggle because our hands, our fingers, they're not used to moving in that specific way. They're not. We're not used to having to. It's odd for us to do this or this or this or this. It's weird. If we didn't grow up doing it, it's awkward. We have to teach our hands, our muscles, how to do it. And sometimes we have to stretch out. We got to stretch them out. And there's different things you can do. He's going to do my stretches because I said it. But there's different things you could do. You could stretch out your fingers. You can just kind of put a little bit of pressure on there. I used to play the piano. And so my piano teacher was very stretch out your fingers because, you got to get them fingers like, oh. So, just practice stretching out, pushing down, there's so many different stretches you could do. I don't have fancy names for them,
Yeah.
but just what?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, there's one where, because a lot of times when you're finger spelling a lot, the muscles on the underside of your forearms will get really tense. And so one of the things that interpreters often do, if you watch them in the classroom, or if you watch them interpret like a long lecture, you'll see when they're not signing, a lot of times they're stretching out those muscles. They bend their wrist down and up. A lot of times they have tension in the shoulders. And so there's various stretches that you can do to really kind of release the tension. Yeah, that would be a fun workshop to do.
About self-care when it comes to signing, because it's hard. It's hard on your hands, on your body, especially as you get older. But there are certain stretches that you can do. You can Google different hand stretches. If you Googled hand stretches, you'll find a whole long list of different things you can do. But just stretching out those muscles before before
I'm thinking ahead.
I know. Before and after your finger spelling, your interpreting, your signing, you stretch out. Just like when you work out, you got to stretch. Same thing, when your body's getting used to producing these signs, getting used to making these movements. Sometimes we just have to stretch. And the more we do it, the more we stretch, the more we practice, and stuff. Everything will kind of loosen up over time. Okay. Where am I? Here.
So we did speed, comprehension, receptive skills, finger spelling,
remembering the signs.
The signs that you learn. So
that's on you.
Okay,
You've got the words.
So there's a couple things, or at least a couple books that I wanted to reference in regard to remembering what you learn. First, before I get into that, if you find yourself mid-conversation and you forget a particular sign and you're beating yourself up about it, stop. You don't have to beat yourself up about forgetting things. That's just part of the language learning process. Laugh it off, and you'll be able to go back and look up what the sign was, and it's going to stick that much better. The more times that happens, it strengthens the synaptic connections in your brain, and it becomes that memory becomes more consolidated. So it's a long process from acquisition to consolidation, but just forgetting and remembering and recalling is just all part of that process. So the first book that I wanted to reference is Unlimited Memory by Kevin Horsley. Kevin Horsley is a grandmaster chess player, and he has the world record for memorizing the most digits of pi. I believe it's 10,000 plus. So it's, he is really good at the various memory strategies and how to improve your memory. So one of the things to remember is that you can actually improve your memory like any other muscle. Your memory has the ability to improve. So that's one thing that we kind of have to tell ourselves. But anyways, one of the things that we can really do is to make sure that we use something a lot, and we can use spaced repetition systems. If you Google it, you can find it as SRS. And basically, it's just when you acquire new information, then you're going to want to review it quite a bit when you first acquire that knowledge. And then over time, you can reference it less and less. And it becomes easier and easier to recall.
What was the author's name again?
Kevin Horsley. So Kevin,
Kevin,
and then Horsley, Horsley.
Kevin Horsley. Okay.
Kevin Horsley. And the name of that book is Unlimited Memory.
Unlimited Memory.
And the other one that I recently read is Why We Sleep. And in there they have found out that if you have a good night's sleep, it can actually help your recall and reproduction by about I wish I had the book on me right now. I think it's somewhere between 20 to 40%. And they've done various studies as far as, because when you sleep, because a lot of your memories and a lot of the things that you acquire, whether it's a language, whether it's a skill, even if your daily experiences, relationships, all of that stuff that happens to you in the daytime when you're awake gets stored in the hippocampus, and it's kind of the short-term memory locker. And it's not until you go to sleep that it transfers out of the hippocampus and gets stored into the neocortex. And if you want to, and it's just like, if you've ever seen Inside Out, that Disney movie, And you can kind of think of the hippocampus as all the little memory orbs on the wall in headquarters. And then when the character goes to sleep, what happens, right? All those memories get shot out of headquarters and they get distributed into the neocortex. And so basically that's transferring your memories from short-term to long-term memory, right? And so if we're shortchanging ourselves on sleep, if we're only getting 5-6 hours of sleep, then we're going to be forgetting a lot of the things that we learn. And so one thing that we can take advantage of is just being kind to ourselves. And again, it kind of comes to that self-care. Get enough sleep, and it's a freebie. You have so many benefits, and it goes outside of just improving your memory, but it can also improve your health drastically. And so if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the sleep aspect of it, the name of the book was Why We Sleep, and the author is Matthew Walker. Really, really good read if it's something that you want to learn more about. Okay, so I think that's pretty good ways as far as remembering the signs.
Mm-hmm.
They're staying motivated, making the time. Let's see here.
I kind of want to go over some of the comments that we had gotten before when we sent out. It was an email asking everybody, like, what are your struggles? Right. One of the things in here, and I'm going to bring it up because it is really important, is someone says they struggle with facial expressions. Why do I have to do them? Why are they so important? What's the big deal? Well, I'm going to kind of go into it a little bit, not too much. Sorry, I was reading a comment. We as hearing people, if I'm upset, you know it. And it doesn't have to be from my face. I'm very good at being stoic. But if I speak to you and I'm upset, you'll know, because you'll hear it in my voice, my tone of voice. If I'm happy, you'll know. If I'm upset, if I'm sad, you're going to know. And that's because we use our voice to portray our emotions, how we're feeling. And it's our register of some sort, Well, the deaf, that happens here. If they're happy, you know because of their face. If they're sad, you know because of their face. If they're angry, you know because of their face. It's their way of communicating. It's their, why is my word gone? It's their pitch, tone. Somebody help me out here.
Inflection.
Inflection? Is that what it is? The word's gone. But anyways, so when we sign, if we're straight-faced and we're signing, I have no idea if you're happy. I have no idea if you're sad. Is it a good story? Is it a bad story? Are you mad? I have no idea, because if you're stoic, they can't tell. And it's awkward and it's weird. I've had conversations with people like that, and I'm like, what? I don't know how to engage with you. I had an interpreter, and I can use her as an example because she's my niece. She struggled. Oh, she struggled. I love her. But she had the most stoic face you'd ever seen in your life. And she would interpret in the beginning when she was first started interpreting, and she was so blank-faced. And I'd work with her, I'd train with her, and she'd go, and I'd walk up to her and go smack, 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 like right in her forehead. And she's like, oh, what? I'm like, dude, fix your face. I'm like, I can't, if I can't read you, your deaf clients can't read you. There's no way. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. And it's a skill that we have to acquire, because in the hearing culture, we don't always, use our face to that extent. We can do a lot with just our voice. And sometimes when we're using our own facial expression, when we use facial expressions in sign language, we feel like we're being too dramatic. It's too drama. Like, do I really need to be, this expressive and like this over the top? Yeah, we do. Because that is where a lot of the message is here in our hands, but it also comes from our face too. One of the things that can help you with that, if you're like, look, I just don't have it in me. I don't have it in me. If you Google emotions, you can, there's these, like, they're almost posters, pictures. They have all the different emotions, these little faces. Sit on your hands and read a word, happy. You have to convey happy without saying it out loud or using sign language. How would you do it? You're gonna have to do it. You're gonna have to, well, I'd smile, or I'd perk up, or my eyes would get big, and I'm gonna be happy. Okay, be sad. You know, you have to, and it's a skill. You have to practice. It was not difficult for me to learn how to use my face. Believe it or not. It was for him. Chris has never been a facial expressive person. He's always right here. He's always just very stoic, very chill, very relaxed, very not like that. But he's always been very, chill. So when he was learning sign language and when he was learning how to do it, it was a struggle because that wasn't natural to him. Using his face wasn't natural, and it was weird. But as time goes on, we realize just how important it is for us to use our facial expressions because it helps convey our message. It helps bring to life what we're trying to say. So that's one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about because I saw it come up a couple of times about, facial expressions, why they're important, why we should do them, and kind of how we can help teach ourselves to use them. I know why it's important.
And Okina, she's like, I know why it's important. It's just I struggle with it.
I struggle with it. And I know. And it, like I said, for some, if you're a more reserved person, it's like, for me, I'm a very outgoing, loud, audacious person. So for me, I'm like, woo, and it's there. Like, you just know. But if you do struggle with it, like I said, you can Google emotions, practice sitting on your hands, don't say anything, and just in the mirror. Really, and it's gonna be weird. It's gonna be like, oh, it's embarrassing. Yeah, but nobody's looking at you. Do it in the mirror, practice, really show that emotion. If you have a learning buddy, like a learning buddy, somebody that you're learning sign language with, say, hey, look, I'm struggling with the facial expressions. Can you help me out here? Can you help me or help? I'm gonna give you an emotion, and I'm gonna, show you this emotion. Sorry, my brain says, no, we're not gonna talk about it. And I need you to help me understand, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what emotion I'm trying to portray? Let them throw it at you and be quick. Sad. And you're like, oh, and you have to be sad. Make it fun, make it enjoyable. It takes time. And, nobody's ever going to be like somebody else. So if you look at somebody, but their facial expressions are so good, but they're not you. Nobody's going to be you. Nobody's going to be them. Nobody's going to be me. Nobody's going to be him because you are your own person. You convey message your own way. We do the best that we can. We give our expressions. We give everything we have, but we don't have to be the best. We just try our best, do our best, and it's going to be okay. Everybody will. They'll understand
enough.
Oh my God, it's been a long day. Anyways.
But just to kind of expand a little bit on that, because that was something that I really did struggle with. And it's funny because I was mentoring an interpreter a couple weeks ago, and I would tell her how introverted I was and how I just was very non-expressive. And she was just mind-blown shocked. I'm like, believe me, I was like the sad kid in school that was all by himself because I didn't want to associate with anybody. And that was me. I was super introverted and it was just me and I was fine with that. And I don't think I'm probably not the only one in that camp. But anyways, so when it came to learning sign language, that was something that I genuinely did struggle with was being expressive. And so one of the things that they had us do in our class is on top of sitting in our hands and trying to emulate an emotion, we would be put into pairs, and one would let's say I was practicing the emotions, right? And so my job was to bounce this balloon off my elbow, and as it was floating in the air, your partner would yell out an emotion really quick and go sad, and so you had to instantly put on a sad face before you hit that balloon again. And then the balloon's floating up in the air, and they go angry. And you put on your angry face, and then you hit up the balloon again, go frustrated. And that one's easy because usually you're frustrated at that point. But anyways, you just kind of go through the emotions that way. And kind of having that pressure to do it on command can really help things move along too. Because sometimes if we just sit there and think about it too much, we talk ourselves out of it, or we end up looking more awkward than whatever emotion we're shooting for. I have to leave the live stream. Will this be available to watch later? Yes, Lisa. And I want to say there was another comment that Anokina had earlier. It was about telling a whole story. So her whole comment was remembering the signs I learned, and also receptive skills in telling a whole story in sign. I think that can be really tough too, because a lot of times we get stuck in the routine of word for word. And let's say I want to say, oh, I went to the grocery store and I bought some blackberry jam. And all of a sudden we're like, I went to the store. How do I sign each one of these words? And I I see some of us.
Gross.
I see some people smiling on Zoom because I know, like, I've been there. And I think if you are a hearing person learning sign language, you're naturally going to want to know every single sign for every single word you want to sign in a sentence, even the ones that you typically wouldn't use, right? But one of the things that is going to really help with that is thinking in the language. And I know that is another thing that a lot of people have been shared with me that they've been struggling with. Like, how do I stop thinking in English and start thinking in sign? And that's going to be a process of exposure and usage. And so you think of, we tend not to think about how we acquired our primary language as kids, but you'd be surprised how much of that is almost all exposure. So I did take a linguistics class in college several years ago, and one of the things that they talked about is the amount of exposure that a child has and the correlation between that and their language development or their acquisition. And so the statistics are actually pretty alarming. And so in the course of the first 3 to 5 years, a kid could be exposed to millions of words, no exaggeration. And some poor scientists ended up having to count these words. But they transcribed years in these households, and they measured how many words these kids were exposed to. And it would range from 15 million to 45 million words. And the correlation there was the less words a kid was exposed to, the less language they acquired. And so by the time they were 3 years old, the kid that was exposed to less knew maybe about shoot, I forget the number. I think it was like 100. Oh no, it was about 500 words by age 3 or so. And then the kids on the other side of the spectrum, they would know about 1,500 words plus. And so, about 3 times as much exposure, about 3 times as much language acquired. And so one of the things that can really help us to help think of or help to start thinking in the language. Sorry, it's getting late, and we're not even on the East Coast. It's only 7 o'clock. But anyways, so yeah, if you want to start thinking in the language first, then you really have to expose yourself to the language. And this is something that we were able to do by immersion. And so very early on, we decided to go to meetings and assemblies to where we were pretty much the only hearing people there. And everybody else was either deaf or pretty fluent in sign language. And so that does a few things for you. It really humbles you. It forces you to use what you know. And it kind of helps you realize that, people aren't quite as judgmental as you think they are. And also, to really give respect for those that are deaf living in a hearing world. So if you're hearing, try to live in the deaf world for a day. And it will really give you a lot of empathy to what they have to live with day in and day out. It's tough to be the only person in the room that isn't understood because they don't speak your language.
Ooh.
Go ahead.
I have something I want to add to that. Mainly because to talking about living in a deaf world, when we were learning sign language, our teacher was amazing. And he said, okay, this is what I want you to do. He told all this. One person, he said, I want you to leave the room. We had no idea what was going on. He picked. He didn't explain nothing. He's like, you go out, stand outside until I tell you to come back. All right. So we left. The rest of us, he said, I want you to put your hands in your pockets, and I want you to pretend you're having a conversation with your partner. Mouth, pretend to laugh. Don't say anything out loud, but just be like, I want you to do that. And we're like, okay, why? He goes, do not vocally say one word. Make no sound. Okay. So, we all paired off and we start, we all think it's hilarious, but we're doing it. Ha ha ha, And so teacher brings back in the other guy. He comes in and he's so confused. He's like, what the heck is going on? And so we're all like basically ignored him. And we're doing, having a grand old time doing this weird thing that we didn't understand at the time. And he's like standing there dumbfounded. He's like, I don't understand what you guys are doing. Why aren't you responding back to me? Hello? And we just kept doing our thing. That lasted about 2 minutes. Teacher said, enough, sit down. He asked him, what happened? He goes, did you understand what was going on? He's like, no, I had no idea what was going on. He goes, why not? And he goes, because I couldn't understand what they were saying. He goes, why? Well, I couldn't hear him. And he looks at us. He goes, what did you just learn? I was like, oh, shoot. His point was that is how a deaf person feels when they walk into a room full of hearing people. A deaf person is left out. They have no idea what's going on in the room. They're alone. And it's sad because he asked him, how did it make you feel? He goes, well, eventually he goes, when it kept kind of going on, I started feeling a little like, he was sad. He felt a little offended. He felt sad. And he was like, he got awkward and weird. And he goes, exactly. He's like, that's the point. He goes, we need to be aware and cognizant of how the deaf feel in a hearing world. I had a point to that, but I got so involved in my story. You were talking about what? Living. It was
like how we'd go to meetings and conventions and we'd be only hearing people.
Exposure. It was exposure.
Exposure, yes.
Exposure. So exposing yourself to, sorry. Yeah, that's me.
Tangents.
But exposing yourself to the language, because that's going to be the only way you're really going to dive in and learn is having that exposure to the language. The best person to teach you is going to be the deaf, because they have the type of exposure that a hearing person can never give you. So if you have the ability to go to deaf events, to watch sign language, there's the Daily Moth, there's Sign Duo, there's Signed with Heart, get as much exposure as you can. That's going to be what's going to really help your language skills take off. And like Chris said, people are not as judgy as you might think or feel that they're being. It's hard because nobody wants to make a mistake. I don't want to sign something wrong because it's embarrassing. I don't want to sign something wrong because it might offend somebody. What if I accidentally offend them? Or if it's happened. What if I went to sign early and I signed naked? I've seen it happen. But just because it happens doesn't make you a bad signer. It doesn't make you a bad person. We might laugh. They might laugh. It might be like, no, that's not, you signed the wrong thing. I've got stories for days on that. But it's okay. We need to just, Jerry knows. Jerry's heard some of my stories. I've done it. I have been the person who has signed some things. Shouldn't have signed it. I made a mistake. I didn't know. But it's okay. We need to be able to laugh at ourselves and laugh at our own mistakes and just keep moving forward in the language. My notes disappeared.
Oh, sorry.
Got it. Okay, I'm back.
So Brenda says thinking in the language. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, thinking in the language. It's hard to put yourself there. It really is, because we've grown up our whole lives thinking in our language. So to change our brain to think in a different language is hard. And it kind of leads into the grammar aspect of it, because there's been some people who've been struggling with grammar. And we can get stuck on grammar. And I'm going to tell you, don't judge me. I could care less about grammar. And I say that because no matter if I signed ASL in the perfect, most beautiful grammar you've ever seen, or I signed it on an English grammar, they're going to know. They're going to understand you. Your grammar doesn't have to be perfect, because
I think you're the only one that uses English grammar when you're first learning sign language.
No, we all use English grammar when we're first learning sign language. It was funny. We were taught every aspect of ASL grammar, the nitty gritty. Oh, so boring to me. And then our teacher says, now I'm going to teach you how to break it. He goes, because you will never find somebody who will always sign perfect ASL grammar. It's good to know. Let me say that. I'm going to say that right now. ASL grammar is very important to know, because that's part of the language. That's the structure of the language. But just like English grammar, none of us speak in appropriate English grammar all the time, because there's different ways of speaking. I'm from California, as I'm sure you can tell. I'm from California. The way I speak is not even close to how they speak in New York. Very different. Not how they speak on the East Coast. Not how they speak in the Midwest. We all speak differently. We all say different things. Our grammar might shift a little bit. Sign language is the same way. They might change something up. Their grammar might be a little different, or they might not use grammar. When I first became an interpreter, I had precise ASL grammar, because that's how I was taught. Okay, so I was strict ASL. Boom, 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 boom. I had a client, could not understand a word I said. He was like, what? What are you saying? What? Couldn't understand me, because he was not ASL grammar. He was more English. So I had to change, and my brain was like, what? And my boss was like, yeah, it happens. We have to learn to be flexible. We have to learn to be flexible when we communicate. We have to learn to be flexible with ourselves and not be so strict, thinking that it's this way. I have to know the grammar because I have to. No, you should. You should learn it, but it doesn't mean you're going to forever use it, and that's okay. And a lot of times we feel we cannot progress in the language. We feel like we're not good enough because I just can't get this grammar down. I'm not getting the grammar. Maybe I shouldn't learn sign language. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'm not able to do it. Maybe this is best for somebody else. Absolutely not. No way. The grammar is just this much of the language. It's not as important as you think it is. It's important. You should learn it, but it's not a make or break for you to be able to do or to learn the language. It's not. You could never learn the grammar and still communicate and sign. So if grammar is something that gives you anxiety, it's stressing you out, it's making you feel this big in your ability to learn, get rid of it. You'll learn grammar later, all in good time. Don't let that be a make or break for you. Go on. Yeah. I saw you.
Well, because it's easy for
for
someone like us to say like, oh yeah, don't worry about the grammar. But there are some polyglots out there that and polyglot is just somebody that speaks a lot of languages.
Thank you.
And so like one in particular, Steve Kaufman, he has great tips as far as learning language learning, and he is somebody who has learned 20 plus languages, and he's now in his 70s. He founded LinkQ, and really is an expert at language learning, right? And one of the things that he mentions is don't stress about the grammar. The grammar will come with exposure. And we kind of rewind the clocks back to when we were kids, or maybe even earlier than that, toddlers, babies. And, when we were 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I don't remember taking a grammar class at that age. And none of us have, right? Because we were able to get all of what we needed strictly from the brain is really great at being able to take a lot of data and make sense of it, even at a really young age. And the technical term for that is neuroplasticity, and which basically just means that your brain has the ability to learn, and the more you focus on a certain task or skill or language, the stronger the connections are between your synapses. And so one of the things that we kind of have to talk ourselves out of is the myth of it's too hard, or I'm struggling with this, or I need to learn it perfectly. I need to understand the time topic, or I need to understand it perfectly before I even get started, right? And so the better way to learn languages more quickly is to just first of all, you need to increase your exposure. You need the data, you need the input. And so the more you can intake, then the more you're going to be able to work with. And the next step of that is using what you have acquired. And this is probably the most uncomfortable part because, nobody wants to be embarrassed and nobody wants to make a mistake. And, maybe you've heard of analysis paralysis. Sometimes we, sometimes we feel like we can't get started unless we can get started on the right foot. And we get stuck in the analysis phase of a particular thing when we're learning a job or a skill or a language. We just want to be able to start at year 10, right? Like nobody wants to start at year 1. They want to be able to already have the skills of somebody that has been doing it for 10 years or like 40,000 hours. Like you just, it's not how it works. We kind of have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and using what we have learned, even if it's not perfect, even if it's sometimes wrong. That's just part of the language learning process. And when we're kids, we giggle and we move on with our lives. As an adult, it's this soul crushing experience. Like, oh my God, I made a mistake and people laughed at me, and that's the end of that. But if you can be a little bit more resilient and you'll be better for it, and you'll be able to be a part of this really wonderful community. It may be a lot of work and it might be a lot of effort, but believe me, the payoff is well worth it. And go ahead.
Well, I just want to, when we're talking about exposure, I'm not sure if anyone's caught it. And if you haven't, that's 100% okay. But I've been slightly exposing you to a new way of signing something. It recently, well, I can't say recent, probably within the last 2 or 3 years, I think. The sign for language has changed. I have been doing language for you, and then I'll change it and do language for you. This is the new way to sign language. And I've been doing both because I've been trying to slightly expose you to another form of that sign. This so you understand, but this so you can see that there's something new. The sign has changed. So that's another part of that exposure. But I wanted to let you guys know. So one, so you understood why I kept doing this while I was interpreting. I kept bouncing from this to this. But two, so you can see the importance of exposure. Because sign language changes all the time. Culture is no longer culture. It's culture. That's also new. It starts on the East Coast and it slowly trickles its way down to us. So these
family. I haven't really seen that one take hold.
I haven't seen that one yet.
That's more of a Gallaudet East Coast sign, but because family with F's, and I forget who I saw this from, but it was someone from Gallaudet, and they're like, "Oh yeah, family." I haven't seen that really take up in our area at least, but that's another kind of a new emerging sign.
But having that exposure, that exposure. I'll give you one more example because, like I said, I can go on days about this. But one example, I have a friend, an interpreting friend. She is from Minnesota. She said one of the signs that they would do there. Yeah, how do you like it? One of the signs that they would do there, she goes, it's totally different than California. Well, let me ask you, how do you sign favorite? You were going to sign favorite. How would you sign favorite? Favorite, right? We all do that. Favorite, your preference, your favorite, whatever. If somebody's from somewhere else and they're like, that's not how I sign it. I'm like, okay, well, here's going to be an example of this. Favorite. She says where she's from, they sign favorite. I'm all, say what? What was that? I said, what was that? And she's like, and she goes, now that could have just been in my community, but it was favorite. And she's a bent V. I'm like, no, I did not say you were wrong. I will never say that to you. That's wrong. Unless it's genuinely wrong. Like if you signed cat, it's going to be wrong. I'm going to fix that. But in your area, if the deaf in your area sign favorite or pizza, which is how I learned it, and then I moved to Central California and they signed pizza, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong because there are so many variations to signs. It's just like variations in the English language. In California, I call it pizza. In New York, they call it pie. It's weird, but it's what they call it. or we say soda, back east they say pop, or at least that's what my dad said. He's from Indiana. They said pop.
In
And
Washington growing up, it was soda pop.
Soda pop?
It's both, yeah.
Wow. Overachievers. So there's different ways of saying things. There's different ways of signing things too. It's not just a one size fits all, my way or the highway. There's a broad spectrum of sign language and how things are signed. So it's just something to keep in mind. Again, exposure. I'm getting chats and I want to read. Oh man, I just did a video assignment and I signed sex instead of notice. Oh, super embarrassing. Oh, friend. Yes, I understand. Notice versus sex. Very similar hand shapes, just the movement, the location, and the
orientation is the same.
Yeah, I understand.
Notice, orientation, location, movement, expression.
Sex versus notice. Friend, I'm sorry. I understand. That must have been like soul crushing. I know, but you
won't forget.
You will never make that mistake again. And sometimes, I will not say stories, but I've seen similar, if not just a hair worse, stories, and you will never mistake those two signs again. I'm glad I've been learning ASL on YouTube because I just found out that one of my coworkers is deaf, so I can get some more practice. Wonderful. Yes, absolutely. See, and it's good because you never know. That's the thing about sign language with deaf in particular. If somebody is blind, there's obviously you can tell they have the cane. There's a word for it, I'm sure. The cane. If somebody's paraplegic, they're in a wheelchair. There's obvious disabilities. Deafness isn't one of them. So being able to have, this skill to communicate with them at work, if you work at a grocery store, if you're working at a school and the student's deaf, just having this ability, even if your language level is super minimal, the effort that you put out there is greatly appreciated. They really appreciate it. If you're like, hi, my name is, and they're like, oh, sign? A little bit. If you're like, just a little bit, it's okay to be like, just a little bit. Oh, okay. And then they're going to be super patient and they're going to be like, oh, okay. But that effort there, oh man, they love it, and it's great. It's great for them. One of my main struggles is actually just finding other people to practice with in person. I'm part of a few online groups, but there's something about practicing in person that's super helpful to me. Preach. Sure. Yeah, buddy.
And that's something that it's one of the reasons why we wanted to set up free practice sessions online, because we know that how many people really struggle with that. And Barb actually recently emailed us, and I don't think she's with us on Zoom tonight, but she wrote in and she was like, oh, I'm so grateful and appreciative for the environment that we were able to set with that particular Zoom group, because in some of these online group sessions, there is a lot of judgment. It's probably it's usually like hearing people arguing about how something is signed specifically, and it's like, oh well, no, my variation's right, or you're wrong, or just a lot of judgment, a lot of yeah, I see Jerry and Pamela laughing because you probably have experienced that and know what I'm talking about, right? And we've been there too. We know what's out there, and we're so proud of the community that we've been able to build through the sessions that we hold on Wednesdays nights. If you haven't been a part of that and you've been struggling to find somebody to work with, that's a great place to go. Everybody that has been there has been a wonderful group of people to work with, and it's been that way ever since April 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. Yep. Is when we set that up.
Jerry was the first one there.
That's true.
Jerry was our first person in the group session. But yeah, and it's true. It is a shame. Interrupt me. It is a shame that happens. It really is. And I apologize for those out there who suffer with that, because there are some groups out there that can be very judgmental, very negative. We've seen it. We know people who've been a part of it, and that's not a way to learn. when we set up the group practice sessions, like Chris said, back in April of 2020, we were very meticulous about it, because the last thing we wanted was for somebody's learning experience to be horrible, to be judged, to be mocked, to be bullied. That was a huge rule in our group, that, you know, we would hop in and bounce into the rooms to make sure that that wasn't happening. Because if it was happening, you're out. I'm like, I will not, I don't deal well with bullies. I don't deal well with it. And the nitpicking and the, oh, you're wrong. You're right. Shh, hush, be quiet. It's fine. We'll learn. So we wanted to make sure that everybody had a very supportive environment. We're going to make mistakes. That's okay. Don't have to get mad about it. We're going to sign things differently. That's okay. That's what happens. Don't need to be nitpicky about it. So having that supportive environment was very important. And so I'm really glad that over the last almost, I'm going to be starting what, the 3 years?
Pushing 3 years.
Pushing 3 years. That everybody has had a wonderful experience with it. So I am very grateful for the ones who go there, who have been going, who make that such a supportive environment for those who are learning, because that's what it's all about. That's what's really important, is having that environment. But having somebody in person, when COVID hit, it messed up a lot of things. Let's call a spade a spade. It messed up a lot of stuff. And finding practice buddies in person was a challenge. And it still sometimes might be. It's getting better. Everything's kind of going back to normalcy, whatever that is now. But in your local areas, maybe see if there's any deaf events. Starbucks, usually they have like a board, and they'll post different events and stuff. So you might check there. If you have a deaf and hard of hearing service center or something like that, you might want to check to see if they host any deaf events, or your local community college ASL classes. Reaching out to some of these different places, they might have deaf events, they might have study groups, little workshops, things like that in person in your own community. And so there's nothing wrong with reaching out to them and seeing what they've got. It's hard, but when all else fails, like you said, you know, you go to these online practice groups. They're great places too, but I understand how hard it can be, for sure, to find somebody to practice with in person. But that being said, we are coming up to the end of our live stream. I know it's getting late for the what?
I just wanted to touch on one, probably not two. This one right here, Kristen Benford. Because we are both professional interpreters, she said, as an interpreter, I still worry that I am conveying the correct message. And so it might be one thing when you're learning a new language, or let's say you're learning sign language, right? And it's
interpretation. No.
It's one thing to make a mistake when you're just having a casual conversation, and you know they know that you're learning, right? It's quite a different story if you are an interpreter and they are dependent upon you for clear and concise communication. And the last thing you want is to convey the wrong message. And as an interpreter, it's a lot of pressure. And hopefully you do feel that pressure, because you don't want to just be nonchalant about it and just whatever, I'll do my best. What if you're in a doctor's office and you fingerspell the wrong prescription, or you misunderstand the pain that they're trying to express and they get the wrong treatment? It's really important, if you are an interpreter, to make sure that you're able to convey the correct message. So with that said, I was going to turn that over to you.
Oh, okay.
So what would you tell Kristen?
That is
Kirsten, sorry.
That is a workshop all by itself too, which would be a fun one. Yes, I understand. Sorry, I have to process this. Yes, I understand when you're. For me personally, I'm an interpreter who does everything under the sun. emergency rooms, hospitals, mental health, schools, district meetings, city meetings, city planning meetings, you name it, I've done it. There's a lot of stress there. There's a lot of pressure there because, like Chris said, the last thing we want to do is make a mistake. And it can be nerve-wracking. But one of the best things we can do is to evaluate ourselves as an interpreter. Are we, when we go to accept a job, do we have the skills, the qualifications to do that job? If we like, you know what, I don't feel qualified to interpret a mental health intake evaluation, don't do it. If you don't feel qualified to do it, don't do it. My recommendation would be, even as a professor, I have had 5 mentors, and I still have some. I'm a certified interpreter. I've been doing this a very long time, but I still have a mentor. Why? Because I'm not perfect. I don't have, all the knowledge. I need backup. I need someone to help me out. Hey, you know what? I'm struggling with this. Can you help me out? Can you watch me interpret? Is there something I need to fix? You need, there's nothing wrong with getting a mentor, somebody that you can bounce your
just get some feedback from.
Yeah, feedback.
Honest,
unbiased
honest
feedback. You don't want somebody who's like, you're fine. That does nothing for you. That will not help you. It won't. It won't. I've had feedback. Like, you're fine. I'm like, well, that's a lie. I know there was something that I could have improved on. Having a mentor, having somebody who can give you that appropriate feedback, somebody who can support you, critique, modify, adjust. It's going to be hard. We're never, well, hopefully we're never going to be like, I'm fine. I'm a good interpreter. I'm the best interpreter. And I'm good. I don't need, I hope not. I hope you don't do that because there's no such thing as the perfect interpreter. We always have room for improvement. We always need somebody helping us, critiquing us, having our back, because like I said, language changes, terminology changes, things change, and we need to keep up with the times, and we need somebody supporting us through it. So finding a mentor, somebody who you can trust to help guide you, to help be that support for you, is one of my suggestions. Like I said, that's a workshop all by itself when it comes to that. But just that little bit of information alone. If you have any more questions about that, feel free to email Chris about it, and then we can help you with that a little bit later. But yeah, wait, there's a comment that I can't read it. I'm
so shine. I have been to local deaf church, but I feel like I don't know enough.
Oh, friend, I know. And you know what? That happens, and that's okay. Don't feel bad. Shyness, that everybody has that to some extent. And I know when you say, like, I feel like I don't have enough, that's where that self-confidence comes in, because you know what? We might not be fluent. We might only know 100 signs, but you know what? Those 100 signs are 100 signs that you didn't know before. And so whatever you know, use it. Even if the only thing you can say is, hi, my name is, that's okay. You got yourself out there. That's the first step. You put yourself out there. Just keep going. It's a process. It's going to be a process, but use what you know. Even if you don't feel like it's enough, it's something than it was before. Go ahead, Jerry.
I thought I was going to have to do that for a minute there.
Sorry.
I just want to echo something you and Chris said earlier about you used the term immerse, right?
Oh, immerse,
yeah. And I just want to share that I've immersed myself into going out and finding deaf people. Like I went to a picnic about a month ago. Went to a Renaissance where they were like 300 to 400 people. Saturday was Deaf Day, so they had all these interpreters. They had
fun
storytellers, and I even had the chance to get phone numbers and email addresses from some of the actors. So that's going to help me out a lot. Also,
that's
tomorrow
cool.
I'm going to a banquet in Greenville, a deaf banquet. with Faith and Kathy, who's flying in from Japan.
Fun.
And,
That's
yeah,
cool.
so Kathy's flying in, so I'll see her Sunday, and we're all going out to eat. So we're gonna do some practicing and do some. We got a surprise for Kathy though, Faith and I. So we won't tell it right now. And so I'm just saying to your audience, to the audience, that immersing yourself into the language is the best way to learn. And I've learned so much from the both of you. Why? Because you've been thoughtful, kind, considerate, generous. Well, that's enough about me now. But anyway, so I've learned so much, and I just want to thank you, Chris and Ms. Johnny, for all you dedicated to the line for us to practice with. But immersion, like we go into a coffee break. Pam and I went to a coffee break, so we find so many activities out here to involve ourselves in. So that's the best way to learn. And like Ms. Johnny said, this mirror is my best friend. Yeah, it is. So I'm not where I want to be, but I'm where I need to be right now. So I continue to practice. Thank you. That's all my time.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm so glad that that you've been able to progress in the language. That's amazing. And you're going to keep going. Do not give up. Go ahead, Pamela.
I guess my biggest thing, what do you do? I'm trying to learn. So what do you do in reference to my biggest thing when someone's signing and when they start finger spelling, I just go like this, my whole mind. I just want them to start over and go slow. And it's like, when they start, I'm like, what can I do to keep them just like, just like
the immediate disengagement, like I'm done.
Yes. It's like, and I'm like, okay, do it again. It makes me want, I want to learn, but it's like they go so fast. I'm like, it just automatically. I'm like, so what can I do to help improve that?
Well, that comes down to mindset. When we've had bad experiences with something like that, like if it's been a constant struggle for you, you're automatically going to have like a bad taste in your mouth with it. So as soon as the hand comes up to fingerspell, you're like, oh no. And I get that. We all have that one thing that we're like, nope, I don't even want to look at it. We almost have to force ourselves to do it. If you know they're getting ready to fingerspell, stop them in advance. Wait. If you're going to fingerspell it, do you mind going slow for me? And just being like, wait. Because sometimes, like me, if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'll own up to it. I'll put myself out there. I'm like, I'll fingerspell and move on. And I get no, oh my God. And then I know, oh shoot, my bad. I pick up on it. But sometimes when we're having a conversation, we don't really think about it. So it's okay to just interject and be like, whoa, I missed it. What was this? And just forcing ourselves to, because we have no choice but to accept the fingerspelling aspect of it. So maybe just practicing your receptive, practicing fingerspelling in a mirror. Who does it? Bill Vickers has fingerspelling practice videos. Sign with Heart, I think she does too, right?
She has some. There are some like automated ones where I forget the website off the top of my head, but there are some where it'll just spit out random words, but it's not an actual hand, but it's just like the hand.
Yeah, I'm doing that one now.
ASL.com.
Oh, good. I didn't know that.
We were discussing this yesterday, Pam and I.
Oh, nice. Oh,
awesome.
Good.
Yeah, I love this aspect of it.
I like that. But I worry about I'm sounding fast enough. Sometimes you try to keep up with the speaker. Like I do songs at church, so I sign songs.
Right.
And now we're trying to learn to interpret more, But it's like we're trying to keep up with them. Like, okay, but I sign a lot of songs, so we have interpreters, but we do the song version.
Yeah.
You know what? I think our next workshop, because there are a few who are wanting to be interpreters or who interpret just, for friends or like at church, I think the next workshop we're going to have is going to be
more
about
focused about
interpreting. And there's going to, and
Yeah.
about tips and tricks when you are interpreting, how you can keep up with a speaker. Because that's rough. You know, I mean, if you got somebody out there and they're just hammering away and you're like trying, you know, that.
Yes. I love you guys, and I see you talk fast like I do. Oh my God. At least y'all talking and I'm looking, but it's like, I know you talk fast, I talk fast, but Chris is trying to keep up with them. Like,
I know. And it's, yeah. And as an interpreter, it's funny. I forget that an interpreter has to keep up with me, and I'll ramble and just, and sometimes I'll catch him out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, oh, that's right. I'm sorry. You would think I would be more aware of it, because I do it every day, and I get stuck with people who are lecturing, and I'm like, bro, just take a breath so I can catch up, and then I'm being that person. But
any movies y'all suggest watching or anything?
You know,
no.
You know, there's a TV show that I love.
Amsterdam. I love that. They got the lady on there, she's deaf, and they starting to sound more New Amsterdam, so I like that.
Yeah. There was Switched at Birth was a good TV show. I loved that show. When my parents were learning sign, they would watch. I'm like, you're watching it. I'm like, because, you know, try not to read the closed captions if at all possible. But that's a really good show because it exposes you to a lot of information, a lot of deaf culture, deaf history. It's a really good show. It's you know, it's a family show, but it is really good.
It also starts out with people learning how to sign. So they start out signing slower, and it's easier to understand.
Yeah. And so that show I really loved. They have 1, 2, 3, 4,
like
5 or
4
6
or 5 seasons.
Well, no, they have like 5 or 6 different deaf actors and actresses in it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. Amazing though. It's really good.
Hey, Miss Johnny. I'm sorry, one more thing I want to tell you. I think you would like this. When I went to a Renaissance about 4 months ago. I met a student of Amber Galloway.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He said that they work together.
Oh.
Yeah. He was an interpreter. But when I was at the Renaissance, the preacher was moving so fast. This guy was a coder for his dad. He sat beside me. He said, "Oh man, don't worry. I'm going to interpret for you." So I could keep up with the preacher, but on the outside, signing with other deaf people, they gave me some feedback. They said, "Man, you know what? You're pretty good." I said, "Well, I appreciate that. You're just being kind." He said, "No, you're pretty good." And they will slow down for you. We talked about that. Deaf people will slow down for you. They want you to learn. You know. So I just want to share that.
Yeah, and it's true. They will. They're more likely to slow down for you than a hearing person is.
Yeah.
A hearing person will be like, okay, and keep going. But a deaf person, they'll be like, oh, okay. And they're more likely to slow down. But yeah, Pamela, I would just say, like I said, it's a mindset thing, but just really forcing yourself. You just have to, unfortunately, you're just going to have to force yourself into the situation. But just practice that receptive, expose yourself to it as much as you can, and not be afraid to interject with them and say, look, I don't get you. I mean, I had a client where I stopped her 5 times. I'm like, I don't get what? And she thought it was the funniest thing. Me, I was like frustrated. I was like, Ma, because I couldn't get it. And she laughed and she's like, okay. But it happens. And you know what? It happens to more people than you think who struggle with the finger spelling aspect of it.
And I love the class that we do on Wednesdays. Let me ask y'all this question. How do you know when to go from beginner to like low intermediate or immediate? How do you know what's the best?
Honestly,
go before you're comfortable.
Honestly, it's just, you're going to have to, like, next Wednesday, just type in there, I'm low intermediate, and see how it goes. You might, it's going to be, yeah. And if you're in there and you're like, you know what? I'm not getting even this much of it, and it's just going whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Okay. Then
I'm getting a lot of it, especially in beginner class. I'm like, I'm just there, and I'm like, I think I may can do it, but I'm not. I was like, I don't want to move too fast. So.
oh yeah, if you're like, yeah, next week, just go ahead and just hop right into the low intermediate or intermediate and see how it goes. Because we're gonna eventually, you have to put yourself out there, even if you don't quite feel ready. You're probably ready.
Okay.
That's what I used to do.
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
jump in.
Yeah, Jerry was all over the place.
Yeah, I forget the quote, but the quote goes, the best time to plant the tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is to plant it now. And so a lot of times we like, oh, I something holds us back, right? Like, maybe I'll learn this other time, or maybe I'll take that class another day. Just do it. You're probably going to be, you're much more likely to regret not doing the thing than doing the thing and maybe not going your way, right? Like, you don't want to live with that regret. And so just, what's the absolute worst thing that can happen to you? They go a little too fast, or, maybe you feel like you're not quite ready, so you step back down to a beginner level. Or what happens if it goes right? Like, oh man, this is the right spot for me, and it really helps you push yourself to the next level. So our recommendation is always to go a little bit more further than you're comfortable with, and the rest of you will catch up.
Yeah. Stasha girl.
Oh, Stasha girl.
Would we be opening to critiquing some of her older material that she has? Just curious. Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead. Email it to me.
Go ahead and email it to Chris. Do you drop your?
I guess I could type it in. Chris at aslbasics.com. Yeah. So go ahead, and if you have any other further questions, go ahead and feel free to email me. We'll try to set up another workshop in the next month or so and cover all the things that we didn't have an opportunity to cover tonight.
I'm hoping because Chris is going to be off work starting December 15th is his last day, because all the schools go on Christmas vacation. He's going to be off work for 3 weeks. So hopefully 1 or 2 of the Wednesdays that he's off, we're going to jump into the group practice sessions on Wednesdays, right, and check in on everybody and see how everybody's doing.
It's been a long time.
It's been a very long time.
I feel like it's just life, right? And like the past couple of years, ever since we started going back into work in person, both of our schedules just blew up. And so I'm interpreting like 50 hours a week, and she's interpreting 40 hours a week. And then we have a daughter that's 4 years old right now, and she's blowing through school like no tomorrow. She's not quite 5 yet, but she's already halfway through first grade. She's just blowing through everything we give her. And so we're doing all that, and we still hold the workshops every month, and so we want to make sure that everybody's covered and that we provide the value that everybody deserves. But we do hopefully start taking advantage of like the winter breaks and the spring breaks, and hopefully we can put out a course out there.
He's going to be setting up another. Is it? It's not
a
boot camp.
Yeah, something along those lines. I just recently like threw out a poll and see like what kind of courses people would be interested in, like if they would be interested in like learning how to establish new habits, or focus on their health, or accelerated learning, or like a sign language boot camp. And like 90% people like boot camp.
Boot camp.
So,
but it'd be like a 5-day boot camp thing. There's gonna be more information about that later, but. Yeah, once everything starts slowing down again. It's
been a couple of years, but I think a lot of people would really enjoy another boot camp like that. And the last one that we did, like we had a lot of positive. Yeah, I think it was 2020. It's been a couple of years, and so I think a lot of people, at least the cohort that we did it with, I think we had about 30 students, and like they had the best time.
It was a lot of fun.
There was a lot of progress, and it was great.
We had like it was like 30 minutes of the boot camp. Then there was a 20-minute group practice session. And then another, at the end of that, it was open live Q&A. And then, so it just, plus you had like different stuff that would tonight, but that was a lot of fun though. Yeah. We had like 30 students or something in there, and that was a blast. But okay. We have like jumped so far over time. But if you guys have any questions or anything, yeah, feel free to email Chris, and then we will be setting up our next workshop. What's today? December 1st? Okay, so
Yeah,
the
December
next
1st.
workshop will be either at the end of December or the beginning part of January. And if you guys have anything like you're like, hey, I'd really like to see a workshop on this, or this. Like I said, send Chris an email and be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I want to know more about it. Absolutely let us know. But thank you. I'm going to email you, and thank you for pronouncing my name quickly. Oh, you're welcome.
A couple things that we didn't get to tonight was consistency. And I don't think we managed to talk about making the time for it. Similar signs, man. We didn't even get to touch on like variations and signs that look the same. So there's a lot of things that we didn't get a chance to do. Not tonight. But let me know like
10 o'clock on the East Coast
for the next workshop. Would you prefer us cover some of those aspects that we didn't cover tonight, like similar signs and making the time for it, remaining motivated, and all those other things? Or would you like a workshop more on interpreting? You don't have to answer me right now, but if you want, you can leave it in the chat, or you can email me, and I'll start picking some brains and see what you would like the next workshop to be. Which one do you think would be more valuable?
Similar signs.
Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and call it a night. Yep. Thank you so much for being with us, especially everybody on the East Coast or in other time zones that are later than
that
it is
are not
here.
In California where we're at.
Thanks for staying up late with us, and
have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. You guys have, be careful out there because now winter's coming. It's snowing. It's getting crazy. It's been pouring rain here all night. So, all right, guys, stay safe. We'll see you guys later. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.